Hey guys, it's Jenny Silver, and today I'm talking with Assaf Lichtash from Pershing Square Law Firm. Assaf, can you let me know, just in short, what your company does, what your law firm offers, and who you work with?
Well, we are California's only EDD law firm. We deal with pretty much anything that has to do with the EDD, but primarily we represent individuals in appealing denied EDD benefits. I think it's important to point out that, while I am an attorney and I work with a law firm that represents individuals who have issues with the EDD, nothing that's being said here is being said as a legal advice. What this is for is really to educate the public and provide information from my own experiences to help people understand their situation, assess their situation, and really just educate themselves about what their claims, what could be wrong with their claims and how they can get to receiving their unemployment benefits faster.
What sort of documents should they have prepared? How should they prepare themselves before or during that process?
Right. So whenever you file an appeal, first of all, people should know filing an appeal is free. Okay. The whole process is completely free. You don't have to pay anything. There's no, court fees. There's no filing fees. There's none of that stuff. All you have to do is pay for the postage of sending the appeal letter. As far as what I would recommend, first of all, to increase your appeals are like number games. Okay. It's about making sure you have the highest possible chance. And there are many, many factors in place to determine what your chances are, right? It starts with what you do, in your case, what the nature of your case is, how many documents you have to back up what you have to say, your judge, that's a big deal, how you prepare for it, so on. So, in order to increase your chance of success, you can take a few steps that will definitely do that. The first thing is file your appeal on time. This, for example, okay, that has a bunch of numbers and money on it, there's another side to it. Read the other side. The other side is actually telling you about your appeal rights. This is something that you want to consider. There's a deadline. Now, if you miss a deadline and you file an appeal late, there's still a possibility that your appeal will be considered if it was late for good cause. But don't put yourself in that position, right? File the appeal on time so that you can enjoy the certainty that your case will be reviewed on the merits and not be dismissed for some silly procedural issue that was totally avoidable. Second thing is, everything you say, you're going to be testifying under oath when you discuss things with a judge. But so when you testify under oath, that in and of itself has value as evidence, right? A sworn testimony has a strong value as evidence. But you have to understand the judge is sitting there listening to a lot of stories from a lot of people like you, and they want to know, or I'm sure the question crosses their mind about whether what you're saying is actually true. So you can increase the chance of being found credible by supporting what you say with some documents. You don't have to have a document support every word that comes out of your mouth, but you should have some documents to support generally, the main ideas of what you're saying. A lot of times documents that can help are W-2s, 1099s, pay stubs, right? These are documents that we usually see being used in hearings. It really depends on the nature of the hearing, what the issues are, right? I would recommend that you read closely the notice of hearing that you get and understand what the issues are to determine what you're going to say in advance, and then find documents to back it up so that you can come off as credible and add a facet of credibility to whatever it is you're saying. Send the documents ahead of time because the CIAB is very busy, and CIAB is the Appeals Board, California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. They're very busy, and there may be a gap for you between the time that you send the documents and the time that the judge actually receives them and gets to review them. So be aware of that. I would say if you can, whenever you get denied benefits, there's a legal basis for your denial. Read and understand the law. It may not be what you think it is. There may be a totally different legal mechanism than what you're anticipating that will determine whether you're going to get benefits or not. So spend the time to understand, okay? Sometimes there are multiple laws in play, right? There's an interaction between them. It's not just one thing. There are three bodies of law that really govern this whole thing. The main one is the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. And then there's the California Code of Regulations, Title 22, that deals with all the things that have to do with hearings and legal standards around those hearings, really interprets a lot of the things that are in the appeals, the unemployment insurance code. And then there's also the government code that deals with some of the things that have to do with the EDD. So, sometimes there's an interplay between those and you need to sort of get into it. And if it's too complicated, of course, maybe getting representation is a good idea, but certainly in some cases, it's simple enough for you to do it yourself. If you want to increase your chance of success, spend the time doing that. The Insurance Appeals Board has a monthly meeting. Very interesting for EDD nerds for me, like me to watch. And they go over, the different things and trends and changes that are happening in their system. One of the things that came up is, they're saying that it takes 8 weeks for the EDD to process an appeal. So imagine, if you receive a disqualification letter, this is the process you have to go through. You have to wait 8 weeks for the EDD to actually transmit the appeal from them to the appeals board. Then the appeals board, which is already filed with appeals, has to find a time for a hearing, which will take weeks. Okay?
8 weeks to transmit?
Just to transmit.
Just to transmit is 8 weeks. Wow.
It's complete idle time. So a lot of things could happen in those 8 weeks that would promote your case, and you wouldn't have to wait as long. And then after a decision is made, it takes time for the EDD to implement that as well, and you may be subject to an additional review. So the discussion was, how can we narrow that time frame of the 8 weeks? Is there anything we can do? So they discussed possibly having people file appeals directly with the appeals board instead of filing them with the EDD. That required some change in the regulations, because the regulations say you have to file it with the department, the EDD, not with the appeals board. So the chair of the board of appeals, Marty Block, asked their attorney what happens if the EDD is supposed to transfer promptly, according to the law. What happens if they don't transfer promptly? Is there anything they can do to penalize the EDD? And the answer was no, they can't do anything to penalize the EDD. And I think that's quintessentially why we're here, because there is no price for inefficacy. There is no price to be paid for bad results. Yeah.
So with appeals, you referenced the time frame of once it is transmitted, it can take up to 8 weeks for it to be received. Did I get that correct?
Yes, unfortunately, you got it right.
Okay. So after that 8 week period, when it is received, what's the time frame following that?
What happens is, after 8 weeks, the appeals board receives notice of transmittal that there's an individual, a claimant, who filed an appeal, and they get a file. The file contains basically the entire universe of documents that have made the EDD make the decision that they've made. It has usually claim notes, which is a whole history of all your phone calls and all the actions and activities that have happened in your case. It has the documents that were submitted by you, or documents that the EDD used to consider your benefits, any summaries of interviews that they have had with you, pretty much everything that has to do with your claim. So when they get it, the CYAB gets it, they need to set up a hearing date. Now it takes a long time because there's so many hearings, and there, you can only, reduce the time of a hearing for so much, because it is a timely process, or a time-consuming process. So, you can expect to wait at least this time of year for several weeks before you even get a hearing date. I would say 4 to 6 weeks is a reasonable time frame to wait.
Okay.
So we're talking about 8 weeks plus 4 to 6 weeks waiting on a hearing date. Okay. When you get a hearing date, you're notified 10 days, or the notice of hearing and the file that I just talked about are sent over to you, and you receive them. Well, they're sent over to you 10 days before the hearing, and you receive them probably a week before the hearing, and then you need to start preparing. Okay. It means sending documents, identifying them, figuring out what the law is, figuring out what you're going to say, and so on. Right now, all the hearings are done over the phone. It used to be that the hearings were done in person, but because of the pandemic and social distancing, they're all done over the phone by default. There's no need to request them. Then the hearing takes place, and the judge needs to make a decision. That might not happen, or it's not going to happen right away. Okay, it's going to happen. The judges are really, really effective, and they do it very fast. Usually, the decision is rendered within a few days, and then it's faxed over back to the EDD. And when it's faxed back over to the EDD, it's back in the rabbit hole. I mean, who knows when they're going to respond to it? What I found is, at least now, at this point in time, it's going through additional reviews because of what we talked about earlier. The EDD has turned off the eligibility and all the automatic screening systems during the time of the pandemic. So if your claim is, pre-2021, I would anticipate that it's going to go through an additional review, and you won't be paid right away, even if you have a favorable determination. And that's how you have realities that are created, like what I described to you earlier. One of my clients who was paid $0 from the beginning of the pandemic, March 2020, until now, because he had to go through, jump through all these hoops. Yeah, it was crazy.
Such a long time. Would there be any appeal-specific phone number or contact information aside from the general customer service line that claimants should be calling if they need to check on the status of their appeal, or is it all done through the main customer service line?
Okay, so once your appeal is transmitted to the CYB by the EDD, you'll receive a notice of acknowledgement in the mail, typically, okay? Not 100% of the time, but certainly most of the times. And it's going to tell you in which appeals office your appeal is in. And you can call this appeal office and ask them, when am I going to get a hearing date? They'll give you an estimate, okay? The appeals offices are very accessible. There is no significant waiting time for them. They answer questions. They have always a judge on duty who is able to answer more specific or complicated legal questions or anything like that. But generally, the people are friendly, helpful, and informative. But you have to also keep in mind, they're limited. They can only help you with your appeal. They can't fix your problem. They're not the EDD. If you can't log into your UI online, or if you're pending forever. And another thing that unfortunately they can't do is they cannot enforce the decision. Right? So if you have a favorable decision and now you're waiting on the EDD to actually process it and pay you the money, calling the CYAB about this is not going to make a difference. They just don't have the legal authority to do that. So while your case is in appeal, you can expect a relatively open, transparent, and efficient process. But once it goes back to the EDD, you're back in this, black hole of information. And you have to pretty much find the information yourself, or use the help of, content that's online.
Once it has been processed, you had your appeal, you had the decision in your favor. Is there any sort of time frame for the EDD to then apply that to your account that you've seen?
Right. So the law again says that the time frame is promptly, and promptly means as soon as possible.
Yeah.
There's another thing. It says once it's determined you're eligible, they have to dispense the money promptly. Paying is not hard. They can do that with a flip of a switch. I think that's what I've seen at least. But the question is, do they really find you eligible when there's a question, whether you're eligible if they haven't gone through the eligibility screening earlier in your claim? If your claim predates 2021, it's very likely that the eligibility screen was off. So they have a reason to believe that you might not be eligible, and they can put it through another process. So they're not bound by any specific time frame, and they can, as long as it takes, from a legal standpoint, it can take as long as it takes to identify what your eligibility issues are.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering so many of those questions. I really appreciate your time. Can you just real quick give us a quick recap of where claimants can locate you if they're interested in obtaining more information about your services and your firm?
So the best place to reach us is on our website, www.pershingsquarelaw.com. And we have chat, phone, pretty much a bunch of ways to get a hold of us. So, we're available normal business hours, Monday through Friday.
Well, thank you so much.